Hi, and welcome to Adam Talks with me, Adam Carruthers. As per usual, we are building up for UEFA Euro 2020. A lot to look forward to, and we're focusing on each group specifically. So we're allocating 30 minutes per group to get you prepared for Europe's tournament happening in a very, very short time indeed. Today, we are focusing on Group B. So I'd like to welcome my namesake, Adam Crafton, alongside Caoimhe O'Neill. Now, Adam Crafton is the Athletics Belgium correspondent, and Caoimhe is the Athletics correspondent for the tournament in full. A quick recap of how all the teams managed to get to the finals in the first place. Denmark finishes runners-up in Group D, making their 9th appearance at the tournament, which they also won back in 1992. Finland are making their debut in the competition, having qualified as runners-up in Group J. Belgium were winners of Group I and are making their 6th appearance at the Euros. And finally, we have Russia, runners-up in the same group as Belgium, making their 12th appearance in the competition, which they won back in 1960, long before any of us in this conversation existed, but still part of their history. Adam, let's jump in straight to your specialty. You are the Belgium maestro. Can we keep referring to them as dark horses? It doesn't feel like it, but at the same time, it does. I mean, they finished third in the World Cup a few years ago, and they are ranked #1, numero uno, in the official FIFA rankings, after all.
No, I mean, when you look at some of the star names that they have, Eden Hazard, Romelu Lukaku, Kevin De Bruyne, yeah, of course, you know, even the younger generation, you look now at Yuri Tielemans. So it's fantastic quality that they have. What they probably don't have is that same level of depth that you have with maybe England or France, Spain to a lesser extent, but clearly, you know, the star names are there, and if they turn up on their day, then they're capable of beating anyone. But I still feel, yeah, dark horses is probably a little bit past it now. But I think we can say, you know, among the favourites.
Caoimhe, when it comes to Belgium, it felt like the last few tournaments they went into it, and everybody was saying, all the pundits, all the journalists, oh, this is the last opportunity for the golden generation of Belgium to win a trophy. And it really feels like it in this case. I know Lukaku has hit top form, the best of his entire career from the current campaign, but some of the other players, your Toby Alderweireld's, your Jan Vertonghen's, they're not getting any younger.
Yeah, you're definitely right there. And I think, you know, when you look at the sort of past tournaments they've been in, obviously 2016, I think that was shocking sort of result, wasn't it, for them going out to Wales, I think. And I think, what did they finish 4th then? Was it? So then 3rd in 2018 in the World Cup. Obviously, that was disappointing result for them. You know, it does feel like this is a golden generation of Belgian footballers. I mean, you only have to listen to some of the names Adam was talking about there, and you know, the next generation coming up are also inspired by this current generation. So the talk of golden generation and framing it in that way, I don't think we've done that with England for years. I think, you know, generations will always be filled with talented players. But, you know, they have been ranked #1 in the world now for quite a while, haven't they? And, you know, you think we've got so many quality players, and it just feels like, you know, 2016, 2018, now Euro 2020, you know, this could be sort of their time to at least, you know, reach a final and, you know, put this good generation to use.
The other interesting thing here, Adam, is I mentioned Lukaku and his form, which has been brilliant, phenomenal. I think he just won the Serie A Player of the Year. But on the flip side, Eden Hazard, who we all adored, unless you supported Tottenham or someone he scored against in the Premier League. We love to watch him play, but we've hardly seen him in action for Real Madrid. He has been beset by injuries and all sorts of concerns. So how worrying is it for the national side, given his club form?
Yeah, well, I think there's two ways of looking at it. One way is, here's this guy who's super talented, but they can't keep him fit. Is he, you know, will he break down at the Euros? How will that play out? The other way of looking at it is, he's going to be one of very few, you know, of those real elite players who hasn't played too much over the past year. You know, when you compare it to so many players who just seem burned out by this relentless calendar of football. So there is the potential that actually it gives him a freshness that we don't see from other players. So I think that's quite interesting for them. I interviewed Roberto Martinez last week for The Athletic, and he was talking about Hazard, and he was saying he just can't understand how, you know, a player who for most of his career at Chelsea and Lille before just didn't really miss games at all. He'd play every week, he'd play twice a week. And then he went to Real Madrid, and clearly it's, you know, I don't know whether it's a mixture of pressure, expectation, and also just, you know, he's now hitting 30. Is it just a case of his body wear and tear over time? Have we seen the best of Eden Hazard already? You know, is he actually able to get back to those levels that we saw in his late 20s at Chelsea?
Kiva, that's a great point he brings up there. Have we seen the best of Eden Hazard? Because we always want to will great players on, but sometimes it doesn't work. Look at, seems like a Chelsea curse, but Fernando Torres when he went to Chelsea, or Andrei Shevchenko, or even, I don't know, Morata to an extent as well. Are we past the sell-by date for Eden Hazard, do you feel?
I feel like his Real Madrid move probably come too late for him, to be honest. He probably should have left a season or two early. And, you know, maybe if he would have got into the kind of form and rhythm he was in at Chelsea, which was just, I mean, you know, watching him play against Liverpool, he always turned up, but that was the same for every other club. He turned up in every game, and, you know, watching his struggles, particularly in the Champions League this season, I know he come back from injury, but, you know, watching him against Chelsea, that felt like a moment he could have grasped and been like, right, I'm going to take this now by the scruff of the neck and be that player that he was for Chelsea, because, you know, Chelsea have just won the Champions League, but for a long time, Eden Hazard was holding them up. You know, he was the one sort of, he weren't a one club man by any stretch, but he was the star player out and out. And, you know, to see him sort of just, he dwindled through that game, didn't he? And just looked a shell of his former self. He just doesn't look like fit yet. You know, he just doesn't look the player he was, but we know deep down in there somewhere is that Eden Hazard who can just rip it up. So, you know, Belgian fans will be hoping.
Yeah, I think it's also like we forget with like with recency bias how good he was. I mean, particularly at Chelsea in his last year there, I covered quite a lot of their games, and he was too good for Chelsea. He was too good for the Premier League. It was sometimes players in the Premier League just reach a level where you think he's Barcelona or Real Madrid, and he's not hanging around. He's just too good. It got a bit like that with Gareth Bale, then maybe with Luis Suarez. There were just certain players that you start watching them in the Premier League each week, and you're just like, it's just too easy for you. You need to actually go and challenge yourself at that highest level. I know there's all different arguments over, you know, is the Premier League a higher level anyway than La Liga, but players want to prove themselves in that, you know, really intimidating environment of Real Madrid or Barcelona. And he's not yet been able to do that, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's just ironic, isn't it? You couldn't even write it that he would be facing Chelsea in the Champions League when he makes his return to the side and they get eliminated, and Chelsea are the ones who go on to win the tournament, full stop. But it's not the only injury concern, is it, Adam? Because, well, there's the De Bruyne issue as well with the facial injuries that he suffered against Chelsea, against Rudiger. But even someone like Axel Witsel, who's vastly experienced, he's only just come back to fitness. And I'm sensing that this could be treated in the same way Vincent Kompany was treated during the World Cup, where his fitness was a concern. He missed the first few games, but he returned, I think, for the knockout stages.
Yeah, and I think you can do that in this tournament. You've got 26 people in your squad. That's more players than most Premier League teams used in the entirety of last season. So there's no real reason this time around why you shouldn't, you know, if you've got one or two players who you think could be really useful to you in the knockout stages, then why not take them around, particularly if they're, you know, popular around the camp and good. And, you know, same sort of thing with maybe Jordan Henderson or Harry Maguire with England, where, you know, we don't know yet how fit they would be for the first couple of games, but you'd quite like them in the quarterfinal. So if you can get them there, then sure. With De Bruyne, I imagine he can just borrow Rudiger's mask from what he's been wearing over the past few weeks. So I would be amazed if that keeps him out of the tournament, unless it's, and this is, I'm merely speculating here, unless it's gone into some form of concussion or head injury that means he needs, you know, to be monitored over a longer period of time. But at the moment, it sounds like heavy facial injuries. So I would expect that he'd wear a mask and continue to play.
Yeah, that's Zorro mask, and he certainly has precision of a Zorro with a football, though, instead of a sword. Kiva, with the form of Eden Hazard and the concerns over his fitness, do you think that's even more added responsibility for Kevin De Bruyne, who has been magnificent for the past 2 seasons?
Yeah, I think when you look at De Bruyne, I think, you know, he should probably play, shouldn't he? I don't think anything would keep him out, especially the way, you know, the Champions League final ended for him. I think he'll want to represent his country. So it's kind of similar in a way, and come back to Liverpool, but obviously what happened to Mohamed Salah, and he really wanted to represent Egypt in that World Cup after that, because he wanted to sort of get all that, out of the system. And I think De Bruyne will want to do that, because let's be honest, he should now be a champion of Europe. He's not. He'll be hoping to be with Belgium, and I think I think that's going to make definitely for interesting watching, because he is by far the best midfielder in the world. Really is so technically gifted. When you watch him play, it's just you're jealous watching him that he's Manchester City's player every time you see him, aren't you? He'd make any side he walked into better. There's not a side in world football that wouldn't take him. So I do think a lot depends on him. Even before, Hazard's fitness issues and whatever else, I thought De Bruyne was the go-to man for Belgium. But obviously, they've got a good spine there as well. Obviously, Thibaut Courtois looked in better form. I know obviously they went out the Champions League and Real Madrid didn't win La Liga like they would have hoped, but he's looking like he's overcame that initial sort of shock to the system that going to Real Madrid sort of had on his game. Kind of what Hazard's going through now and working through. So, he'll be looking to him thinking, well, if I can work through that, then, maybe I'll hit peak form too.
Yeah, Courtois, arguably Real Madrid's best player this season. The other one would have to be Karim Benzema, of course. But you talked, Adam, early on about Yuri Tielemans coming to the front now. He's younger than some of the names that we've mentioned, so the future is still bright. Let's not forget Dennis Praet, his Leicester teammate as well. But what about some of the oldest players, the defenders? Now, I should add that in qualifying, they have one of the best records. Now, you could say what you want about qualifying. England always do well in qualifiers, but then they fail at the big tournament. So we can't read too much into it. But how do you think they're going to fare at the biggest stage of all?
It's going to be interesting to see whether, we know Roberto Martinez traditionally likes to play quite expansive football, have his defence quite high, play quite aggressively on the front foot. But he's got defenders that you wonder whether they are still suited to that, with Toby Alderweireld, Jan Vertonghen, Thomas Vermaelen, who's been playing in Japan this past season. Apparently he's done quite well. But even so, it's not necessarily the same level as what he'll have been used to in Spain or in England before. And obviously they've lost Vincent Kompany. They do have two younger defenders in Jason Denayo of Lyon and Dedrick Boyata, who was previously at Celtic and Man City. But can you imagine playing against France with Mbappe, or England with Sterling and Rashford or Foden running in behind you and having that line sort of very high with Belgium? And I'm going to be very interested to see how Martinez balances that in those knockout games against real top teams, whether they just go blow for blow and say, you have an attack and then we'll have an attack with De Bruyne and Lukaku. It could be quite fun. But I think they're probably going to have to just tweak the way they play a little bit in those games.
Roberto Martinez, how convinced are you by his credentials, Kiva? He got relegated, obviously, in the Premier League. We saw that. But he also won the FA Cup. But it's the only noticeable honour next to his name when it comes to being a manager of a national side. You could throw in finishing third in the World Cup as an achievement in itself as well, but there's no trophy there. And I'm sure you would have seen a lot of him when he was at Everton as well.
Yeah, I think he's a manager that doesn't necessarily instill fear in the opposition, like, say, a lot of managers, and Jurgen Klopp, Pep Guardiola. When you're coming up against Thomas Tuchel, those managers now are like, you worry about what kind of tactics they're going to employ. You kind of worry about them as though they're like a player in a mad way. But I've never really had that with Roberto Martinez, maybe just because he didn't fare so well at Everton. But obviously, he did win that FA Cup with Wigan, and then obviously they got relegated, didn't he? So I don't know. He doesn't necessarily stand out to me as a manager who, has got that X factor. But at the same time, he's done a quietly good job with Belgium, because it's a difficult job to do when you've got so many world-class quality players, to get them all playing together and, get them to those positions in tournaments is a difficult thing. And to get them to tournaments, sometimes, that expectation can be a lot. But again, I just come back to he doesn't necessarily instill fear, but, you know, if someone said, oh, Belgium are going to make the final and I'm seeing Roberto Martinez on the touchline, I wouldn't massively question it as well, because he is, you know, he's a good manager. And, you know, for him to go and win it, it wouldn't massively surprise anyone, I don't think. But whether that can happen, I'm not quite sure. You know, you're speaking about the defence there, and experience does come with age, but whether they're just a little bit too aging for, like Adam says, you know, in the later stages of the tournament when you're probably coming against, you know, some of the best and quickest players in the world.
Yeah, and they won't have...
I think... So I just think on Martinez, he's... I think maybe he's given a bit of a hard rap based on, you know, that last season at Everton, where obviously it went wrong for him. But, you know, Wigan, he kept them up for 3 or 4 years, really, and with barely any resources. He was also at Everton at the time before they were spending major money. Their first season there, the first season he had at Everton is still Everton's highest place finish. Even, you know, since they've had Marco Silva, Carlo Ancelotti, Ronald Koeman at the club. You know, the style of play he brought into Swansea, even all those years ago, the club still aspire to now, and was sort of passed on with different managers. So I think he's got a better track record than people maybe give him credit for. And also we've seen him, you know, for example, Belgium played Brazil at the 2018 World Cup in the quarterfinal, beat them 2-1. And he surprised Brazil on the day by playing Romelu Lukaku as a right winger. So he does have, he's tactically smart. I think as well, as Kiva says, he's got this pastoral, paternal nature to him that I think suits very well those clubs or nations that have superstar players. He's not going to fall out with these players. He's going to just try and maximize their talent and edge them along. And I think, I think the other thing is that he's just among a group of national team managers that, you know, in terms of who strikes fear into you as a national team manager at the moment, well, none of them really. You know, is Spain worrying about Gareth Southgate? I mean, no. Are we that worried about facing Roberto Mancini with Italy? Not really. Didier Deschamps even. So it's a weird time for national team managers where there aren't the superstar names that you see in club football.
Yeah, this is a great point as well. But we really have to chug on and talk about 3 of the other sides who will be looking to stop Belgium from qualifying from this group, starting with Denmark. Now, they seem to have fighters here, Kiva. Some real leaders that we see at club level. Schmeichel at Leicester, the most vocal player, I feel, at the club for the Foxes. Højbjerg, one reason why Mourinho wanted to sign him for Spurs was because of his battling nature. A Poulsen up front as well. So how do you think this side is going to do? How strong are the Danes?
I think you've just mentioned there that spine, which you kind of go back to with teams like this, is so strong, you know, from Schmeichel right through. They've got so many talented defenders, Kerr at AC Milan, Vestergaard at Southampton, and obviously Andreas Christensen, who's just won the Champions League. Right through the midfield as well. Obviously, Christian Eriksen is, you know, such a technically gifted player. And I think this Denmark squad are quite technically gifted, probably more so maybe than that squad that won the Euros in 1992. So, you know, they've got that in the DNA as well. You know, Kasper Schmeichel definitely has it, but, you know, they'll look back to that time and I know they're just creating something together. A squad energy can get you through right to the end. You know, you can win this thing. It's not like these clubs and these players from these clubs are coming to the national team just thinking, oh, it'll be a fun 3 games. That they're thinking beyond that. And I think Denmark are definitely, you know, they'll have their eyes on getting out of the group quite comfortably. And you know, I think when you look up front, you do see maybe there's a lack of goals there. There's not that sort of star man, is there? But having someone like Eriksen in behind, I think is important. They've obviously got Martin Braithwaite as well of Barcelona. Maybe doesn't quite fit that, but you know, he's someone who's been training with Messi week in, week out for a while now. So whether he has took anything from that, you don't know. But you know, I think they're an quietly exciting squad, I think, when you look at them. And I think they'll be enjoyable to watch. I think you tend to just watch certain teams because of certain players, and I think Christian Eriksen definitely has that, doesn't he, with Denmark?
Well, we have to discuss his form as well and his recent revival at Inter Milan, Adam, because it looked like he was going to be sold in January or loaned out. It seemed like Conte didn't want to have anything to do with Christian Eriksen. But he's now a champion in Serie A. He was getting more game time. We mentioned Hazard's form and De Bruyne's form, but what about Eriksen? How important was it for him to finish the campaign strongly ahead of a tournament?
I think so, just in terms of having that confidence. I think the other thing with Belgium is there is a real buzz. I was listening to a podcast last week with Peter Schmeichel talking to Jamie Carragher, and he was just describing the real buzz in Denmark about having a couple of the group games in Copenhagen. I think that's maybe something that everyone's forgetting a little bit, that this tournament is just a little bit all over Europe, and a lot of group games will feel like home games for certain nations. Denmark, I think, have got 2 at home. I think the Russians in the same group have got 2 at home. So I think, Belgium will almost feel like they are playing away games, and they are playing away games in this group stage. So I think there's, it's a little bit like the Belgian golden generation for players like Schmeichel and Simon Kjær and Christian Eriksen. It's probably their last, their last shot while they're still at, what they would consider to be their peak. So I think it's quite exciting for them. They've got the players obviously that you've mentioned, but also, even players like Joachim Andersen, who had a fantastic season at Fulham, who Tottenham are probably looking to sign as well this summer. A couple of the players who have been fantastic for Brentford are involved in the squad. And, they beat England, didn't they, just a few months ago at Wembley when Harry Maguire was sent off. I think they're going to be a really difficult team to play against, a very difficult team to beat. They're always one of those teams that they're never going to go out and beat you 3-0 or really put on a show, but they're going to run you close. And I think, last time in the World Cup, it was Croatia who knocked them out on penalties. And obviously Croatia got to the final. So I don't think they're a team you want to come up against. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Russia now, because this seems like a side who are very much reliant on the old guard. They've got Zhirkov, at least in the provisional squad. He's older than me, and I'm 36. So I think that says quite a bit. A lot of names we become familiar with. Zoba, Golovin became a star at the World Cup, and they hit the quarterfinals on home soil, like Adam mentioned. They will also have some matches on home soil for this tournament, but it feels like momentum has stalled for them. Am I being unfair to the Russians by saying that?
I think probably they'd say that, wouldn't they? But I think when you look and they've got players that are 37, you're kind of thinking, why aren't they trying to bring that younger generation through? And I do think there are talented players there, like Golovin, and obviously Zuba, who's, he scores goals week in, week out for Zenit, doesn't he? They've got those sort of, and I mean, he's so tall. The last time I remember at the World Cup, he's just like, was he the tallest person there? Because he was just huge. They've got quality players, definitely. Fernandez at right back. I think, there's definitely players there. There's quality. But again, it just feels like it doesn't all maybe link together for Russia. But having said that, I mean, they've got games at home, like you've mentioned. Look how well they did on home soil at the World Cup. They were unlucky to go out to Croatia. I think it was on penalties. I think that's how Croatia slid to the final, didn't they? Just by beating everyone on penalties. I feel like if they can get that sort of momentum again, it doesn't matter for Russia. They're one of those sides that they're so patriotic and they care so much about playing for Russia that it doesn't necessarily always matter about who's playing. It's pride for each player to play, and they sort of have this togetherness that I think if they can tap into that from the World Cup, they knocked Spain out, which was like, no one was expecting that. They've got capabilities definitely there to do it. It's just whether they can sort of put it together and have that run. And I think on the back of the World Cup, no one would be massively shocked if they did make it out of this group.
Yeah, let's not forget they did beat Spain, who, well, they are a shadow of themselves from when they won the tournament and the World Cup, but still, they are Spain. Final talking point for this group would be Finland. All eyes, Adam, on Timo Pukki. Probably the same way he will be for Norwich as well in the Premier League, like we saw season before last.
Yeah, and I think he's probably one of those players who's benefited from the delay in the tournament, because if you remember to last summer, obviously Norwich had gone down. Pukki had a great start in the Premier League, but then really fizzled out. So he's been banging goals in the Championship again. He scored 10 goals in qualifying for Finland. clearly a lot of excitement around him. He's still recovering from an ankle injury, which is a little bit of a concern for Finland, and they've got the same issue with their captain,
Tim Sparv.
Tim Sparv, yeah, who's, I think he's played, I saw yesterday, he's played 45 minutes since the end of March. So they do have these major concerns, you know, about key players, and they don't have the depth, you know, that maybe other nations have. But what they do have is this idea, you know, it's their first tournament, it's their first major tournament, and that brings with it, you know, a certain element of chaos that can happen, and you know, you sort of ride that wave of emotion. You know, I don't think they have any home games, do they? But they, you know, a couple of games probably in Scandinavia, and you know, I imagine they will look to ride that wave of emotion and see where it takes them. Just being at the major tournament is a success for them. Obviously, beneficiaries of UEFA expanding the tournament so that most countries in Europe get to go. But even so, it's still, you know, for those players and the fans, it's a new experience for them, and they'll look to maximise that.
Yeah. One final thing on Finland. Caoimhe, I'm going to try to connect the dots here because I know you cover Liverpool extensively. So Steven Gerrard is Mr. Liverpool. He's at Rangers, managing Rangers. So you've probably seen some of their highlights, at least in Scotland. You might have seen Glenn KAMARA in action because he could be another key player for Finland, maybe.
Yeah, defensive-minded midfielder, isn't he? I mean, he's only 25. Sometimes when you watch him, you do think almost he looks a little bit older on the pitch, you know, the sort of experience he sort of carries on his shoulders. I think, you know, Steven Gerrard's mentioned numerous times how important of a player he was, you know, to they went unbeaten in the Scottish Premiership, which, you know, a lot of people think, oh, you know, that's easy done, it's only Scotland, but that's a difficult thing. That's people, you know, teams don't do that every year. I think he was really important to that, one of the key players there, and I think he will be for Finland as well. Adam said, you know, the first time going to these tournaments are really tricky. So for players like Teemu Pukki to be coming off the back of that great season he's had, and for KAMARA as well to, you know, have ended Celtic's reign in Scotland, that's massive for those players. Medals are massive, I think. And you know, that'll be, their experience will be vital as they look to pull off something that seems pretty impossible getting out this group, but you know, it's the Euros, anything can happen.
You know what, Caoimhe, since you're on that topic, who is going to qualify from this group for the next stage of the tournament? What's your prediction?
I mean, Belgium will definitely. I mean, Belgium will win the group, Adam. You would assume. But
yeah, I would think so. Belgium, it's two that go through or three?
Two, but then there's the like the third place. It depends on possible knockout phase based on ranking, right. So it's impossible to say right now. But yeah, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I'd say Belgium. I mean, it'd be a disaster if they don't, and then I would expect Denmark to do that. But I feel like it's the kind of group that it might not be that many. You know, I could see sort of a few different teams on 3 or 4 by the end of it. I don't think it'll be, you know, Denmark and Belgium on 9s and 6s necessarily.
What about your?
Maybe Finland will be the new Iceland.
That would be a magical story. Maybe they'll have their own version of the Viking clap and all of that. All right, let's talk about the Euros in general. Just some quick fire predictions from the both of you. So the first 3, I'm going to start with Adam and then Caoimhe, and then we're going to flip the roles there. So don't want anyone copying from each other. Dark horses, Adam Crafton.
Italy, I would say. I don't know if that's cheating. They're quite famous, aren't they, Italy? But they were excellent in qualification with Roberto Mancini. Pragmatic football tends to do quite well in tournaments. So yeah, I would say Italy are my dark horses.
So diverse, because you're not the first journalist from The Athletic to have said that, but some of the journalists have also said Italy will be the disappointment of the tournament in a big contrast to dark horses. Caoimhe, who's your dark horse?
I'm probably, I mean, can I say the Netherlands? Just
sure.
Without Van Dijk, I do feel there's been a lot of sort of questions around them, naturally. But I've just got, you know, I don't think they're the favourites. They're a little bit off that, aren't they? So I've just got a sneaky feeling they might, you know, do something special and get it together because, you know, they've needed to, haven't they? We've seen them get close in recent years, but not quite close enough.
Yeah, well, they haven't even qualified for the last two major tournaments, this being their first. They got to the finals of the Nations League, but they've changed their manager since. So it would be very, very interesting, like you say, without a Van Dijk. What about the Golden Boot? Who's going to have the most goals chalked next to their name come mid-July, Adam?
I'd say Lukaku, actually. He should get enough in the group stages, even if they go out. Even if they go out quite early in the knockout rounds. So I'll go with Romelu Lukaku.
Yeah, matured so much under Antonio Conte. He even credited him as a farewell message when Conte was confirmed to have left Inter Milan. Kiva, Lukaku for you or somebody else?
I mean, that was me on my list there, but I guess I'll have to pick someone else now. But I'll probably go with Kylian Mbappe just to pick up where he left off at the World Cup. It wouldn't surprise any of us, would it? But I've got a great feeling for Lukaku, just the form he's in. I think he, definitely easily get a hat-trick against someone, won't he?
Yeah. What about the Golden Glove, Adam? Who's going to be the keeper with the most clean sheets?
Well, I suppose it has to be someone that goes quite far in the tournament. Hugo Lloris, I have to say, just because I think France will go furthest. Less a reflection of how highly I rate him these days, more just he's got a really good 10 players in front of him.
Yeah, I'm a Spurs supporter, so I shall reserve my opinion on that. Kiva.
See, I've got a good feeling for Germany, even though they're in the group of death. I do feel like maybe something could just happen. They've got it in them, haven't they? So Manuel Neuer perhaps could do that.
One final hurrah for Joachim Löw. All right, I'm going to start now with you, Kiva. So who's going to be the player of the tournament? Not necessarily the most goals, not necessarily a winner, but who will be the player of the tournament?
See, I did have Mbappe down, but now I've had to remove everything about. So, do you know what? I'm gonna go with Kevin De Bruyne. I'm gonna say he's gonna come back from that Champions League final sadness and sorrow, and he's gonna pick up where he left off with Man City just before that, and he's gonna be phenomenal. And perhaps we'll all just be drooling over him as we usually do.
Yeah, rightfully so. Ball's in your court, Adam. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I'm a bit torn. I think it might end up being the player who ends up being the player of every tournament he plays in, which is N'Golo Kante. Because when I look across different teams across Europe, he's just the best at what he does by a mile. I mean, imagine if England had an N'Golo Kante, how it would transform their prospects and give real balance to that midfield. So I'll say Kante, but I also, with Benzema, he's either going to be incredible or do nothing, is my instinct on it. A bit like when Diego Costa was called up for Spain to the World Cup, was it 2014 or 2018, when he was called up and just didn't do anything. It was the first one, it was 2014, where initially he just didn't turn up at the tournament and was really disappointing.
I love how you've referenced a lot of things today back to England. How will this player fare against England? Imagine if England had an N'Golo Kante. So I know where your allegiance is. It's almost like you're wearing an England shirt with the all white there. The disappointment of the tournament, Kiva. This could be a player, manager, a team, whatever suits your fancy, really.
I think I'm going to go with Cristiano Ronaldo because he comes into every tournament with hype, doesn't he? And I feel like this might be the one where he just sort of bows out without doing anything. Now, having said that, he's probably going to score about 8 goals in every game and be phenomenal and drag Portugal to win the thing again, like he did last time, apart from obviously coming off in that final earlier than he would have wanted. But yeah, I've just got a sneaky feeling that, the season didn't quite unfold at Juventus for him in the way he would have liked. He's still alongside Messi is the greatest ever, isn't he? But I just got a feeling this could be his time to sort of to bow out without quite the parade of the Euros last time around.
Yeah, World Cup, 18 months away. You suspect he'll probably make himself available for that. Might have been benched for the last few games for Juventus, but he still finished top scorer. So, Adam, are you in agreement with Kiva there? Is Ronaldo a good shout, or are you going to go with somebody else or another team? Or
this is for disappointment, right? I'll probably say, I don't even know if it's a disappointment given his recent record, but In contrary to Kiva, I think Holland are potentially going to be the disappointment, just because I don't trust Frank de Boer as a manager, based on what we've seen since he's taken over at Holland, and also obviously previously he had difficult times both in the States and also at Crystal Palace. He seems like a manager who's searching for confidence again. So this tournament feels very make or break for him. Without Van Dijk as well, I think it's going to be a really tough ask for them. But Donny van der Beek might play some football, so there might be a boost in it there for someone.
Yeah, we talked about this in depth in our preview as well, and the Crystal Palace record, terrible for him. Didn't score any goals, lost all the matches. In fact, he didn't win his first 4 matches in charge of the national team either, the first Dutch manager to have an unwanted accolade like that. But I want to end on a high note. So, Kiva, first for you, who's going to win this tournament?
Well, I've like I said before, for the Golden Glove, I've got a feeling if Germany can make it out of the group of death alive, which I think they probably will alongside France, I've got a feeling they'll go all the way. Just, I don't know, I was looking at the squads the past couple of days, and their squad just stood out to me as, just quality all over the field. And I don't know, maybe the sort of over that sort of disappointment of the World Cup, and maybe, they can put something together. I've got a feeling for them. And as I've said throughout it, I mean, it would surprise no one to see Germany win this, would it?
Yeah, I'm going to stitch this question slightly differently for you, Adam, based on your answers today. Are England going to be champions of Europe in July? And if not, why and who else?
No, I don't think they will, just because I'm not sure Gareth Southgate yet has this sort of imagination to get the best out of a lot of the talented players they have, the players like Phil Foden and Jadon Sancho and Jack Grealish, Mason Mount. How do you maximise those talents? My instinct is on Portugal, who have been really good at the last few tournaments, and they've also got this, real new wave of talent now with Ruben Dias and Bruno Fernandes, who we've not really seen properly at tournaments yet, and probably certainly the two best players in Manchester last season. So I'm very excited to see what they do at the tournament this summer, whether they change a bit, because they've been quite pragmatic at the last couple of tournaments. Can they be a bit more expressive? Bernardo Silva as well. They've got so many great technically gifted players. And that group that Kiva talks about, the group of death, I just think, that's the day you want to take off work, isn't it? When you've got France and Germany in the morning and Portugal, and who's the 4th team in that group?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but yes, I know exactly what you mean.
You just pity them, don't you? Really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's horrific for them. So that I think that group it's kind of what you remember about European Championships as a kid. It's like, because the Euros traditionally with the 16 team group phase, you'd always have great nations being pitted against each other. I think this format keeps them away from each other a bit further, but the jeopardy of having Portugal, France and Germany all in the same group makes it a little bit more exciting.
It's Hungary. Hungary are the 4th team in that group. Yeah, and Portugal have more silvers than you can count on your right hand. Should be a good tournament for them, at least for the Portuguese, you hope. I want to thank both of you for taking the time to join me here today. A thoroughly entertaining conversation. Kevin, Adam, we're looking forward to your coverage during the tournament itself via The Athletic. So we'll speak to the both of you again very, very soon. Thanks again.